Today, I'm delighted to welcome Sandra Loughlin, Chief Learning Scientist and Global Head of Talent Enablement and Transformation at EPAM Systems, to the Digital HR Leaders podcast. Sandra, thank you for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation based on the call we had a couple of weeks ago. To start the conversation, please, can you share a little bit about your career journey and your role at EPAM Systems?
Yes, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to share. So prior to coming to EPAM, I was a professor actually at the University of Maryland here in the U.S. My background is in learning science, so the psychology of learning, motivation, cognition, and so on, as well as organizational psychology. So prior to coming to EPAM, I actually taught courses and did research and was looking at the future of bridging the gap between university and work. As part of that, I actually got to know EPAM. I started out as a consultant to EPAM on the side, looking at their learning and talent approach, because for years, clients had been telling EPAM leadership that their people were somehow very special and different. And clients kept saying what's your magic? Do you have anything that you can share? And EPAM they built everything themselves and they didn't quite know. So they said, hey, can you come and look? And so amongst other things, I discovered this amazing organization that does skills and data exceptionally well, and learning programs as well. And so I left my wonderful, lovely career in academia to join EPAM to do two things. So one is to actually continuously improve all of the different people-related approaches, tools, processes that we have in the organization. And the second is to take the best of the best and turn those into solutions for clients. So I'm internally and externally facing, depending on the year. I'm more or less of one, but I have this very unusual, very exciting job at a company that is, I think, breaking a lot of ground in this space.
It certainly is, based on conversation I've had with you and what I've seen for others commenting on as well. And Sandra, we often talk on this program to guests about how to bridge the gap between academia and practice. So I'm sure some of that will probably come out over the next sort of 45 minutes or so. What I love about the story at EPAM, and you kind of put hints of it there, is that it's probably one of the longest examples I've come across of a skills-based organization. Correct me if I'm wrong, but EPAM has been on the skills journey for around 30 years. So yes. I'd be interested, obviously coming into EPAM Systems now, what does the skills-based organization look like at EPAM?
It's how we do business. So at the foundation of everything in our organization are data around skills and work. And again, we've been organized that way, collecting those data for 30 years. But we use those data to make decisions across the board in pretty much every facet of what we do. So we use skills and work data to hire, to staff, to manage performance. We use that to optimize our operations in the organization. We use it to design effective learning programs. We use it to incentivize people to learn through skills-based performance management. It is the nature of how work gets done. And I mean that not just in the people organization, but in the business. It is the foundation for decision-making, for forecasting, for everything. And it's funny because it's so built into the culture here that when I first came and was trying to explain to EPAM leadership, this is very unusual, very exciting, they just didn't believe me because they said, it's not possible that we're different. How does any other organization make decisions? And I'm like, well, I don't know, but they do without all of the incredible data that you have. So
it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, you'll know this as well. There's been the talk about skills-based organization that has been growing and growing and growing over the last few years. The World Economic Forum's highlighted the importance of skills, given the number of jobs that are likely to disappear and the number of new jobs that are likely to be created, partly because of the technology that's around us at the moment. And I guess EPAM is proof that you actually can build a skills-based organization, even if you didn't realize that you were doing something different from everyone else as well. So I think what we'll probably get through in the conversation is little bit of how EPAM has done that, but also your perspective on, you know, both from your time at academia and probably from speaking to other organizations as well, on how you can do this successfully, what some of the pitfalls are, what are some of the things to prioritize. And I know we're going to have quite a big discussion towards the end around the data part of this, because I know some people get bored by data, but data is so important to actually creating the skills-based organization and scaling it, as you've talked about, across all your talent practices. So I'm looking forward to that particular part. In fact, looking forward to all the conversations, Sandra, but I'm particularly looking forward to that part. Now, obviously, there are a lot of opinions around skills-based organizations. A lot of consultants obviously have got wonderful processes and methodologies on how organizations can do this. There's a lot of technology in the space now as well. And certainly when I go to conferences, the two topics I hear about are skills and AI. And I suspect that will be the case next year as well. So I'd love to hear from you, as someone that's actually working in an organization that's doing this. What are the most common myths that you hear about what people think a skills-based organization actually is? And maybe, you could tell us about some of the stuff that, what it isn't as well.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few. So the one that always first comes to mind is the idea that if you're a skills-based organization, you no longer have jobs. Like, it is like a future without jobs. And that is, at least in our experience, very much not the case. There are a lot of reasons for jobs to continue to exist. The difference in how we approach jobs and what is traditionally done is that jobs are traditionally defined like top down, and they're very rigid. So you build a box, you name the box, you put skills and tasks in the box, then you put people in the box and assume that anybody in the box has those skills and can do those tasks. But of course, that's not actually true. Then it creates a host of assumptions. Built on assumptions creates a lot of error and confusion in the space. The difference is that we take a bottom-up approach, a data-driven approach to job definition. So we have jobs, but we identify those jobs by finding naturally occurring clusters of tasks, work that gets done. And that from a data perspective, they do cluster, and very happily, people that have the skills to do those clusters of work also tend to cluster. And so if you just opened up your crayon box, you threw the crayons on the ground, you could actually find nice, clean patterns of colors that we would consider jobs. So we find the naturally occurring things, we build a box, we name the box, and we are able to then evaluate, and on an ongoing basis, the degree to which that box, that job, is still relevant. Are those tasks still clustering? Are the people that can do those tasks still clustering? And so it's a different way of thinking about jobs, but we still have to have them. So that's one of the, I think, biggest myths that I hear. The other ones that I'm not sure they're myths, but I think they're misconceptions. So the biggest one is that people don't often think about skills and tasks in terms of data, but these are just data constructs, right? They're nested. You have different levels of granularity. Data quality becomes a huge issue, right? Like, so thinking about this whole construct from the perspective of data, I think, is extremely clarifying, but it's not what a lot of, at least in my experience, the conversation is focused on. And it needs to be, because it is data, and it's very important to get the data right and understand that it is using data to inform business decisions across the board. That's what skills are, and tasks are the same. Another, I guess, misconception is that this is an HR problem, and it's not, right? Skills, if you think about a workforce, right, that is the engine of any business, human capital. And the degree to which the human capital is aligned to the business strategy from a skills perspective, from a structural perspective, from a mindset perspective, that's a business problem. Because if you don't have that, then you're not able to fulfill your business objectives. And so when I something that I talk about a lot and really try to emphasize is the fact that well, at least at EPAM, right, in our skills-based organization, the business is the driver and the owner of the alignment of skills to the business strategy. HR and the people organization are a critical mechanism by which all of that happens, but they don't own it. It's not their sole problem.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, essentially, it's workforce planning, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't just do it in isolation in HR. You need to be working as a partner with the business to do it effectively. They're very so. I mean, so lots of people start with it. Most companies seem to start with or still start with the job.
Yeah.
What you're doing is you're starting with the skills clusters, and then you start to see presumably how some of those jobs evolve over time. So some of the skills and tasks of a job change if we think about things moving forward as well.
Kind of. We do start with the job, but we don't start by so the way that we think about identifying skills of people actually starts by identifying the work to be done. So we, from the very beginning, actually have been as concerned with defining work and people in terms of skills. The way that we get to skills from a work perspective is we figure out all the tasks, so all the activities and the deliverables, like break work down. And then you think about, okay, well, what are the skills required to get those tasks done? And it's going to be more than one skill because in reality, like skills exist in clusters, and those clusters are associated with tasks, and they tend to, again, there's a lot of data clustering that goes on. So once what tasks are required, what skills are required, then you can go figure out who has those skills. So it's really very much a two sides of the equation. What is the work to be done, and who are the workers to do it?
Okay, that makes sense. That might even help with my next question, which I think certainly a lot of the organisations I speak with, big global organisations in the work that we're doing at Insight 222, they get the why of skills based approach. Where they struggle a little bit is with the how.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, what would be your guidance to those organisations that are maybe starting on their skills journey to set themselves up for success?
Well, I'll actually have to ask them, do they really know the why? Because a lot of the times I hear, well, we're trying to optimize internal mobility, or we're trying to optimize hiring. And those are all fantastic things, but
Mm,
that to me at least is not the why. The
yeah.
why is a business agility play. Again, if people are the engine of business, people have to be tuned to your strategy. And as your strategy changes, as technology evolves, as your competitive landscape evolves, like you need to continually understand who you have in the organization relative to the work that needs to get
Mm,
done. So I would start by figuring that out, right? Because a lot of companies, I think, still think about skills from the perspective of optimizing HR as opposed to optimizing business. And so, I would love to actually sit down and say, okay, well, what are your big reasons? Because it's probably going to have something to do with AI enablement or digital transformation or moving into a new sector of industry, being able to articulate um, the value of skills for agility, no matter what you're doing, but then very specifically for whatever that strategy is. That to me is the starting point. And then from there, like you really want to understand, what is your operating model as a skills-based organization? Who does what? Like, what is the role of the business? What is the role of the people organization and the sub functions underneath that? What is the architecture from a data and technology perspective that's required to actually allow this stuff to happen at scale? What are the roles that you're going to focus on? Because at least from our point of view, being a skills-based organization is not a
mm,
one, all or nothing
mm,
proposition. It's expensive. It's expensive to collect and validate skills data and constantly keep that up from a governance perspective and from a data perspective. It's not worth it to do that for every role. So being able to think about the roles in the organization that are most valuable to focus on, not just initially, but in the long term, what are the roles that are closest to P&L? What are the roles where if people don't have the skills, you're actually exposed from a business perspective, either from a risk perspective or
yeah.
costs or revenue perspective. Being able to really think about all of those things and map it out, then at least everybody has an idea of, in theory, what is it going to take to get here, and then you can sit as a business and say, is it worth it? In which, or which parts of it are worth it? Where should we start? Where does this make most sense? So I think there's a lot of agreement on the space around like this is a super cool thing to do, and less clarity on where is it super cool to do and at what level of fidelity and what does this really mean for everyone across the business, not just the people organization.
Yeah, I think you made a really important point there, or several actually, but a really important point that start with the why. What is the business problem you're trying to solve? And I think too often in HR we can sometimes, as you said, think about the HR problem that we might be trying to solve, internal mobility, for example. Maybe attrition's a bit high and people are leaving because they feel there's no internal opportunities. Now that's clearly a cost to the business, but what's the actual business chat problem around that as well? It's just taking it that little bit further is worth that extra time to define what the business challenge is, because then you're more likely to get the investment and the business on side, which if you don't get the business on side, then you're probably not going to achieve the outcomes that you want to achieve anyway.
Exactly. And not just because you need them to play ball, but you
Mm,
need to actually solve some very critical data and technology foundation problems that the value needs to be significant to justify the investment to do that, right? So, to me, and again, I'm a people person, so like this big focus on technology and data is something that I've only really begun to appreciate being at EPAM for so long. But this is a data problem, and it's a
mm,
technology problem because the data in all of the different systems of record and work are siloed. And to get the value from a business perspective, not just again optimizing for internal mobility or optimizing for hiring, to get the real like the insights that you need to drive the actions that create significant value, you can't have all those data silos. And so being a skills-based organization, one of the critical elements of it is the investment to clean all that stuff up, and that is not cheap. And
mm.
so, there's no way that you're going to get where you're trying to go without the business being on board for helping to orient that, but also to help fund it and continually invest in the infrastructure required.
So I mean, let's talk a little bit about let's do the data and technology piece. Now, what are some of the data sources that a company is going to need to do this effectively? Because they're not all sitting in our HR systems, are they?
No, and that's a big problem, right? For so, when you start thinking about not just defining what the skills are, but defining what is the work to be done and verifying when someone has skills, that really starts to require data from systems of work. So actually like understanding, your ticketing systems or GitHub or what, like all the different places where work really happens. Those are places where skills need to be understood. Tasks need to be, skills, signals around skills and tasks need to be supported. And that means that needs to be integrated with your foundational data in your HCM and your ATS and your learning system. And like really it's everything. Because if you think about all the systems that people touch, or are touched, or touch people. That's the full set of data sources that need to be integrated. And so this is why I think of this as like, this is not a small problem. What's super I like about this space, though, is that this is a problem that every business has, and every business has been trying to solve. Like data silos is a huge issue for not just people, for everything. And so, being able to tie the people use cases to an already awareness of a problem that needs to be solved, and like essentially adding more fuel to the fire of we need to solve this thing, really helps to get that investment to drive forward the data integration and coordination orchestration activities that are, I'm sure, underway in every organization today.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk a little bit more. I mean, let's come for the data, because I think this will help initially. You've mentioned a couple of times now. Start with defining the work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit more about this approach and why it's a critical first step in building that data-driven skill strategy?
Yes. So so at EPAM, we have this tool that has been sitting at the foundation of our skills ontology, and it's a task intelligence tool. So basically, what it does, used to be done by hand, now it's done largely by AI, is look at a role or a position or whatever, and break that down into what are the major tasks. So what are the activities? What are the deliverables? Right? You can do this at different levels of granularity. Like let's say it's like, let's take a role and say like, what are the top 30 tasks, right? Each one of those tasks, in theory, you could make 30 steps underneath each one, but at the highest level, you're thinking about what are those things that need to get done? What is the work to be done? Um, this is very, very important for a lot of reasons. One is because that, when you're thinking about what skills the company needs, it really should be connected to the skills required to do those tasks. So that starts as the foundation of your denominator, if you will, of a skills-based organization. The denominator is the skills the company needs. That comes from tasks. The numerator is skills company has. That comes from any individual. So that lays the foundation. But it's also very valuable in a world of AI and automation. Because when you think about, what is the impact going to be of AI and automation on the workforce, AI is not impacting skills, it's actually doing tasks. And so if you have this task intelligence foundation and understanding the work to be done, you're actually able to have a much better idea of where you're going to expect to see AI and automation having an impact. So that's really helpful for the business. But it's also very helpful because if you have 5 or 6 roles, some subset of each one of those roles is going to be taken away. The tasks will be done now by technology. Now you have a bunch of incomplete roles. And if you have that task intelligence, you can go back to what I was saying earlier, look for naturally clustering tasks, naturally clustering people, and now you're able to build a new job box that is grounded in data. And it also allows you to then have those over time, right? That's going to slowly change because tasks will continue to be taken. But having that task intelligence in the organization is a game changer for understanding the needs of the organization and setting the foundation for agile job and organizational structure design.
And I guess it helps. You've mentioned a couple of times that this is actually quite expensive,
Yeah.
quite time consuming.
Yes.
And you also said that you might not need to apply this across the whole organization. So presumably doing this work helps you prioritize where you might want to, if you're an organization that isn't doing this today, doing this sort of analysis will help you prioritize where you may want to start.
Correct. Now, I will say, so from an intelligence perspective, that's actually pretty cheap, right? These are, we're past the days where you need to bring in some very expensive consulting firm to come in and do thousands of interviews and send you this massive PDF document. We are past that. So both from a skills intelligence and a task intelligence perspective, AI is a game changer from a quality and cost perspective. It's not expensive to do what I just described. People should do that. That should be one of the most critical foundations that the people organization is bringing to the business. Is saying, hey, did you know that we could actually do this thing, and providing the tooling around doing that. What's expensive is maintaining that intelligence, right? So because your data is going to continue to come in, that's going to be cheap. You have the dynamic data feeds, but it takes people to look at that and say, is this still true? Are we still going to align to this? Do we actually want to spend the money to now build new learning programs and redesign jobs? And keeping that system up to date is more expensive, as well as, at least at present, collecting and validating skills data. That's an expensive process because it's not easy today to do that well at scale. That will change. All this will get a lot cheaper, right? Because tooling is emerging right now. But in general, it's also just, even if you had all the tooling, it's still time, and time costs money. And so, thinking about where, again, in what parts of the organization, not just is AI going to have an impact, but what parts of the organization where do you are close to P&L? What jobs actually drive revenue and drive cost and risk? Knowing that and focusing on those roles as the foundation of where do we spend money now? Where do we spend our energy and effort right now? I think is very important. And again, a lot of companies are thinking about just trying to boil the ocean and getting it all done. I don't think the business needs that. I don't think there's a justification from an ROI perspective. Also, it's really hard. So taking this what roles really matter from a business perspective lens allows you to get the business to buy in, create value quickly, and spend less, honestly.
And also, if you can have an impact, then you can get more investment and people are more open to it. So find a stakeholder who's got a problem that they need to solve, a business leader who's got a problem they need to solve, help them solve that problem by doing this work. And then it's much easier to have that conversation with others if you said if the value is there and the effort's worthwhile doing, you're going to get the value from it, which you probably will in most respects, because you get the value for the business, but you also get the value for the workforce as well, don't you? In this approach.
Yeah, and it's what I've had in my experience. So again, EPAM, we work with the IT organization, the R&D, like data, like the tech data side of organizations. And it is amazing to me how many of them are solving their people problems on their own with shadow HR. For whatever reason, and I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, what I hear a lot is that the technology and data organizations, the product organizations need more, they need help. They need help with hiring the right people, with career development, with learning, with everything. And they're asking HR for help and not getting the answer that they want. And so they're standing up there entirely new org structures, technology stacks, like it's crazy. And so I think that in probably any organization, HR can find a partner to do this with, but it has to be a partnership, right? Like it's a bi-directional conversation, and that's something that I see is lacking in many organizations. And I mean that even just from a laying the skills foundation. Again, because skills is not an HR problem, it's a business problem. Finding a partner to get this started, to do your use cases, to do your POCs, and to grow is often, or at least in my experience, can often be the technology organization. They're generally very hungry for this, and are hungry enough that they're going off and doing it on their own. So bringing those groups together would be optimal.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the companies that we work with and I've spoken to that seem to be doing this well are companies that have, they've invested in people analytics teams. And, a lot of this is people analytics teams partnering, with some of their colleagues in HR, particularly in learning, particularly in talent acquisition, but then partnering with the business as well. Yes. But they've got the people that in those teams who can, can wrangle data, who can do the analysis and inform any solutions that they're going to be using. So I think that's might be an interesting hypothesis to test out. You mentioned technology, and again, you could develop some of this technology. You can do it yourself, or there's stuff out on the marketplace. What's rather than naming any names, what's a sort of technology that companies should look to either build or buy to support their skills based work?
This is a big challenge because there's a shift that I think is going to be happening in the HR tech space. So in every other tech stack, you have these things called monoliths, like these big, huge, massive technology infrastructures. And those have been the standard for a very long time. In every other area, right, there's a movement to, it's called strangling the monolith. Like you're trying to actually break out this one massive tool into smaller tools because it's cheaper, it's faster, they can innovate better. It's very, very different. And when you do that, the tools actually, you start to think of them less as tools that you interact with and more as data sources that talk to each other and give you insights, and then you can make actions around those. This, I think, is what's going to be happening relatively soon in the HR space. So right now, in any organization, you have your HCM as the foundation, and increasingly, you have all these other tools that are skills-based to do very better point solutions. As I said earlier, the problem is that all of these things don't talk to each other. The data are structured differently. Your ontologies are very different. And so what you're getting is a system that, again, is maybe optimizing decision-making around skills, but only in verticals. And there's no coordinated effort around that. If I were investing in technology on the HR tech side, I would be putting a pause on finding new point solutions. And I would be, and by the way, this space is about to change really fast, right? So there's going to be there's going to be a lot of acquisitions and a lot of dynamism in this space for the next couple of years. If I were a buyer, I would stop buying stuff for a little bit and I would look for data only solutions. So this would be investing in data layers, like data, like, analytics layers, investing in cleaning up the data, like getting it coordinated, putting it in the same systems. I would be investing in building, using existing sources, but like building an ontology of tasks and skills that is specific to my organization. There's going to be like 80%, 90% even something from the market, but taking the energy and time to work with the business, with your SMEs to tailor all of those to make them specific to your organization. I would be investing in middleware players that are just pulling like signals from different systems of record and work, and coordinating all of those. That's where I would be spending money today, as well as if I had the budget, like actually buying systems that help me validate skills at scale while I wait for this space to calm down. Because what I suspect is going to be happening is there's going to be a tremendous movement and a new set of tools coming out of the next couple of years that are going to actually just make all of this data sing. And instead of trying to optimize more in the point solutions, laying the foundation, getting the business on board, building the business case, and waiting for that future to come, because then you can actually hit the ground running and start getting a lot of those insights and actions that are not really possible to do today at scale, very quickly, which will then help accelerate the transformation for your business.
Now, that's very interesting. Yeah, because I mean, the amount of companies that we speak to at Insight 222 that have a skills taxonomy, for example, in their LMS, they have one in their talent marketplace solution. If they've got one of those, they've probably got one in their HCM. Recruitment are working on something completely different as well. And what you would want, of course, is you would want the same taxonomy coming out to be used across all those systems. And there are some players out there that help companies to do that. But yeah, I think that's quite an interesting piece. That's interesting advice, and I know it's certainly what a lot of people who are maybe responsible for the skills strategy, say, within their organisations from a people perspective are want. So yeah, be interesting to have this conversation in sort of 18 to 24 months, maybe. Sandra, you mentioned there skills validation and verification. This is definitely one of the big challenges that we hear. Either we hear challenges around obviously self-reported or manager reported, and all the challenges around bias, the fact that they're out of date quite quickly. What are some of the reliable ways that organizations can validate skills data? I'm sensing it's by getting into some of the business data sources that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's the answer. And I just want to make a point around skills validation. To me, this is the long play. There's always ways that you can validate skills data today. They're going to be expensive. They're going to be human, like a lot of time and effort from people. That's why I say it's when we think about the ROI of all of this. So you want to think about that's really one of the biggest costs. Over time, this will get better and faster and easier and more scalable and more reliable using increasingly sophisticated tooling. So today, when companies are, they're looking at their skills data and it's verified by self-report, manager report, like as a psychologist, that makes you want to die a little bit inside. But the fact is, it is the actual normal and appropriate starting point. Like, you don't have other sources of data. You need to start with something. Don't rely on those data. They're not good, but they do give some foundation and they are directional. And then start investing in additional tools to help you get better, more valid data. So yes, the most reliable sources of data come from experts who know what they're talking about, looking at your work product and saying, yes, that person actually is demonstrating this skill or this set of skills. Or it comes from systems that are trained to understand what good looks like, doing the exact same thing, right? Those are expensive right now, largely, and they're hard to get access to because, again, the data are not connected. That's okay. Again, like there's a lot of work to be done in the next, to lay the foundation. even though I am the biggest cheerleader for high quality skills data, to me, that is not a problem for tomorrow, but a problem is going to be a lot easier to solve tomorrow. And there's a big foundation that needs to be laid. So even though I care so much about that and have many thoughts on how that should be done well, I would personally not focus on that right now. I would focus on figuring out what are the tasks in your organization that need to get done, who in like and what are the skills required to do them, roughly who kind of might have those tasks, right, or those skills, using self-report, manager report, AI inference, like using what you have today, um, and then playing the long game of getting better and better and better skills validation data as the tooling evolves to support it.
And then that might also be this leads on quite nicely to this question. You mentioned the technology function in companies, particularly wanting to do this because
Yeah.
they need to, basically.
Yes.
So I'd love to sort of expand that a little bit. How does the way that an organization approach skills vary from, industry to industry, and then functions within those industries as well?
So this goes back to the idea that like there's differential ROI for investments in skills intelligence and in infrastructure. There are in every company, I believe, there are roles where. So let me step back. I think that every company is going to ultimately become skills based, but not every role in every company will be. So, for any organization, again, thinking about what are the roles that are closest to P&L, focusing on those. In a company like EPAM, like we're professional services, the majority of the work that we do is done by software engineers, data scientists, AI experts. Like those are the people, those are the roles where we need to have very high quality skills data. Because if we are mismatching people to work, if we don't have the right people in the right roles, it's a problem. Like we're going to lose revenue, we're going to lose clients, we're going to, our business will suffer. Other organizations are going to have those same exact importance of roles, but in different locations. It could be customer service. It actually could be product design, right? It just depends on the different industry. So thinking about, where you're going to get the most value from this investment, it needs to happen. And then with across industries, that's going to be a mega trend, right? Professional services. One of the reasons that everybody in professional services is like on this skills train is because that's what they sell people. That is the nature of the job. And so for a company like EPAM, we're going to have the vast majority of our employees, like we need to have super high quality skills data on. If I am in a different industry, I'm still going to have certain roles, but those roles are likely to take up less of the total population of the organization. It's just the nature of business should dictate where you're spending your energy and money around like, skills and task infrastructure.
It's interesting because if we think about the companies that have, openly come out, shared case studies in this space, they seem to be in the technology area, professional
Yeah.
services. And then the other area I'm seeing a lot is financial services.
Yes.
So an industry that is being transformed effectively
Yep.
at the moment. So where it's very important to understand the skills you've got, the skills you need, the gaps, and who you want to keep, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah.
Certainly, when I was at IBM, when IBM was going through the big transformation in the 2010s, very much it was reinventing itself to be a cloud and mobile securities analytics company. To your point, they really prioritize people who had skills or who could acquire skills in those areas over
Yes.
other parts of the organization. So um, yeah, there's nothing wrong with starting with a pilot in this, is there, or starting with a function to prove the value as we talked.
Not at all. Like, why would you not start? Like, I'm not sure that you can do any transformation whole scale. Like, you need to find people to play with, like who have problems, who want to solve them. Like, neither of you know exactly what you're doing, but you're committed to working together, trying stuff, learning from it, getting data, scaling, getting better. Like, again, the technology organization is often like, please, like putting their hands up, like, please help us. But it could be any other function in the company. Finding not just the place where the work needs to happen, but where work needs to happen. And there are people on the other side who are motivated to do it. It's really like that combination that you would want to start with. And I would also say, some of the skill stuff, like, you don't need any technology. Like, I mean, to scale, you do, but really, like, you don't. Excel is great. Teams is great. Like thinking about lo-fi ways of leveraging skills data, understanding the skills that are required, manipulating those through learning and incentive structures and changes. Like thinking about like applying this whole like let's get work done, let's solve problems with skills data. You don't need to have a massive technology infrastructure to do that in targeted use cases. You need the technology to do it at scale. But if you're starting in this space, I'd rather people start with solving something the business cares about, showing the value, learning from it, building more champions, and then saying, okay, now I need some investment to do this across the organization, or at least in broader swaths of the company.
So to listeners that are thinking, okay, I definitely want to invest more in this. I've been listening to Sandra. I'm really, I'm fired up now. I thought about a couple of areas in my business where I can maybe apply this. Again, talking as an organisation that has really taken this, probably as far as any other company has managed to do so. What are some of the benefits? What's some of the value that you get at EPAM from being a skills-based organisation?
Oh, this is such an easy and hard question to answer. And let's start with the hard part. The hard part is that unlike every other organization, we don't have a transformation story. It isn't as though I can say, prior to skills, here was our time to hire.
Mm.
Prior to skills, here was our attrition rate. Prior to skills, here, whatever, because we just evolved. I mean, for 30 years, we've been just doing this and getting better and better and better at it. So I don't have that like super clean use case to say, here are the benefits. I can tell you what we are confident are the benefits without having the data to back it up. The most important one is that it's a business agility issue. Again, for us, certainly, like we're a technology organization, we've transformed our core business like 4 or 5 times. We're doing it again right now with AI. The reason that we've been able to do this as well as we have and continue to grow like wildfire at the same time is because we do skills-based performance management, meaning that skills data, like if you can do the skill or if you can't do the skill, that actually impacts the degree to which you can keep your job or grow in your career. This builds this massive incentive structure and motivation for people to continually upskill. That is the secret to being agile as a business. Being able to say, okay, as a business, we need to move in this new area. Here are the tasks that need to be done differently. Here are the skills to do them. Here are the gaps that any one individual has. Okay, go close those gaps. Being able to do that, on the fly, like in a relatively quick like fashion, that is what, in addition to all the other things, being skills based has given us. Plus, of course, then you have, people at EPAM, like I think we're like double, our retention rate is double average. Our tenure is more than double the average in our industry. Our employee engagement scores are like through the roof. Like in addition to all of that, like we believe that people come to EPAM, stay at EPAM, like thrive at EPAM because of our, in large part, because of our skills-based approach. But we don't have like a perfect like A/B case to share with the market. But if you ask our CEO, who is the biggest champion for all of this, that's what he would say. It's the ability to be agile as a business and attract, develop, and retain some of the best technology talent in the world in a highly competitive market.
And that ability to pivot, that ability to be agile is so important in your industry, but it's becoming even more important in your industry, but also other industries as well. And if you need to have, that fluidity in your people and understanding if you can pivot to do that. So very interesting. Two final questions before we get to the question of the series. One is around data. You wrote a great article, actually, which I'd definitely recommend listeners check out on your LinkedIn profile around data quality, because you've actually said that this is a data problem that needs to be solved in order to help you get the outcomes that you want. What Can you talk to that a little bit? About some of the what are the elements of skills data that are important for an organization to focus on?
So this is going to go to the skills validation question. Well, not just that. It's actually what skills do you need to, but there's a lot of things to think about. So I'll give a few examples, right? So when you're thinking about what skills you need for any job, there's always a question of like, well, how many should we define? Should it be 10 or 100? To me, this is a variance explained issue, right? In any role, like a certain set of skills or tasks is going to explain a certain percent of like the ability to get that job done. And so, let's say you can hit, I've explained 85% variance with 10 skills. You can add 100 more skills and you can only get yourself up to, I don't know, 92. Like they're diminishing returns exist. So being able to really think about what are we trying to accomplish? How much information do we need? What is the most valuable yet parsimonious data model from a skills perspective that's going to help kind of get us the insights that we need to get the work done? Another one goes to again, like, how do you know if somebody actually has that skill? Right. This is where you're talking about kind of the longer term play around having validation around skills data. But at EPAM, we use skills data to inform very high stakes decisions, but we also have very good quality skills data. And so, we get that by having lots of different data sources, lots of different data from different points in time in different contexts, like really thinking about, every sort. When you're trying to measure latent constructs, it's very difficult to do. You need to have lots and lots of data sources to get strong signal from noise. And so thinking about longer term, like having a bunch of those data sources, so you're collecting a lot of data in a lower cost way, and then actually thinking about like how you're weighting the data sources so that you can prioritize the most high quality ones. Other data elements to think about are the timeliness of the data. Just because I had a skill 5 years ago, I haven't used it. Is that skill relevant? Probably not. Right. So thinking about that, thinking about skills in terms of clusters of data, understanding distance between skills so that you can actually recommend certain skills based on others. There are so many, many data elements to think about when considering skills. And I don't say this to turn people off to the concept, just to say that there are experts, there are data experts who can help with this. People leaders need to, and analytics leaders need to understand the complexity of the data around this, not to scare people off, but to really underscore the importance of thinking about data from a quality perspective, because you need to have good quality to make high important and critical business decisions.
Look, penultimate question for the question of the series, Sandra. As a clear leader in the field, what are some of the most surprising insights or lessons you've learned from having this skills-based approach?
I guess the biggest thing is uh, how lacking it is in so many organizations. Like, again, like when you think about um, all the data that organizations have, they have tons of data on the work, like on their customers. They have tons of data on their products, and because they recognize the value of data to make valuable decisions about those things. What's been remarkable to me is appreciating the not complete lack of data, but we have so much less data around people, even though people are in most organizations like the biggest cost, right? And certainly a huge, like the reason or the mechanism by which you can achieve your business strategy. And so I think that one of the biggest things that I have learned being in this space is that the people that tend to care about people are less comfortable with, aware of, and driven toward making data a core part of understanding and decision making in their space. And so I guess I would say, like, it's been the most eye-opening thing is appreciating that my orientation toward data is not normal, and seeing how hungry organizations are to understand how to do that better, and and also seeing like the super cool emergence of tools to help in this space. It's been eye-opening, and I'm also very excited that I think in the next couple of years we're going to get a lot better, a lot faster, because of renewed interest and support for data-driven decisions in the people space.
And of course, a lot of the time we do have this data, we just don't use it, or we can't access it, or it's sometimes the quality leaves a little bit to be desired. But yeah, a lot of the times we do have the data, sometimes we don't know where to find it.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. And I guess the challenge with skills is you're potentially having to integrate data from lots of different sources, both under the auspices of the HR function and obviously out in the business as well, and probably external to the organisation as well, which actually sets us up quite nicely for the question of the series. So this is the question we're asking everyone in this series of the Digital HR Leaders podcast, and it hopefully is quite an easy one for you actually, Sandra. How can organizations leverage skills intelligence to make more informed decisions?
Well, collect good data. Collect good data, and then understand and build an operating model where it is expected that those data are going to be analyzed and used to inform decision making. Again, this can be done with tools. It will definitely have to have some governance involved, but like I think the number one and walking away point is there's a need for skills intelligence. The sources do exist. They're not going to be perfect, but they're good enough. Marry that with intelligence on tasks, and then just think about operating as a business in a world where you have excellent access to data and can use that access to understand the problem space, weigh options, and then apply, and then see how well your interventions have worked.
And actually, that kind of sort of a follow-up question, Sandra, because we haven't really talked about it yet, about external data to support skills strategy. I mean, what would be your guidance around that, and what external skills data, for example, do you bring into the mix at EPAM to help you?
So we do, of course, a lot of workforce analysis, right? So we scrape data just like many other kind of data sources, looking at what are the job postings, what are the skills that are required, what are trends in the space from a skills perspective, compensation related, like all of the workforce related stuff. We're also looking at external data on our existing people. What are they doing? What are their public appearances? What are they writing about on LinkedIn? Like those are external data sources that we pull in a lot. And we are also pulling in data sources that I guess they're external, I don't know, where we have clients who are requesting stuff from us. So that's another source that we're pulling in to understand what is all the nature of the work to be done. And very importantly, we have data sources where we're crowdsourcing projections, like forecasting. What are the trends? What are the skills? Like what are the things that we think are coming down the pike? Bringing all of those data sources together, along with a ton of stuff coming from inside the organization, is a massive effort, but it is the best way for us to have the closest thing to a crystal ball to be able to look into the future, assess our current state against that, and make decisions.
Well, Sandra, it's been absolutely fantastic to have this longer conversation. I think we had about 30 minutes last time. It was just the two of us. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise and guidance, really, for listeners around skills. I mean, it really is truly impressive what you've done, what EPAM's done over the last 30 years, I think. And I suspect we'll be hearing a lot more from you at conferences and the like coming up. I definitely recommend people follow you on LinkedIn. But are there any other ways that people can stay in touch with you, Sandra, or learn more about the work that you're doing at EPAM?
Yeah, just reach out. Like I feel like I spend half my life talking about this because it's like a passion area of mine. So I do talk about it on LinkedIn a lot. You can always reach out to me. And yeah, I'm starting to go to conferences. So come find me, and we can chat. But I'm always happy to talk more about this.
Well, I look forward to seeing you at a conference in the not too distant future, Sandra. So take care, and thank you very much for being a guest on the show.
Thanks for having me. This was super awesome.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice, and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.